So we're just going to be having another look at the 2022 paper. Even though this one is blurry, I do possess the ability to read it somewhat. So let's have a go at it once more. So I don't think anybody really have issues with number one, but which of the following countries are included in a geographic definition of the Caribbean? Suriname would be out. Guyana generally. Guyana would be out as well. The Bahamas should be out. Do you guys agree with these? Is this fine?
Yes, sir.
Alright. Which of the following countries is not a part of the Greater Antilles? I guess we're going to go with the Bahamas here. In which of the following ways was the impact of the encomienda system felt in Caribbean societies by the 1540s? What would you guys say for this one?
I'm sorry, we said B, the creation of the mestizo race.
Of the mestizo race, alright. So, the creation of the mestizo race would be plausible here. Not the occupation, no, and introduction of Africans through slavery by the 1540s. That wouldn't generally be a direct impact of the encomienda system, but of Bartholomew de las Casas specifically, and the end of the encomienda system. Number 4. Wow, I'm jumping the gun. The Commonwealth Caribbean is made up of countries which, what does Commonwealth refer to? Former British colonies ruled by the British monarch. What would it be?
Sorry.
Former British colonies. A.
Alright, former British colonies. 5. One of the most significant achievements of adult suffrage in the Caribbean societies, or in Caribbean societies rather, in the mid 20th century was political enfranchisement.
Yes, sir.
Alright. So you should know what that is. If you guys have any questions or anything, you can just stop me immediately. Number 6, which of the following systems is associated with the Chinese presence in the Caribbean? This would be the indentureship. A social class may best be described as a section of population which... Could you guys have a go at that while I let somebody into the meeting, please?
Economic status.
Economic status? Yeah. Out of all of them, probably. Alright, number 8. The fusion of 2 or more cultural practices to produce a new cultural form comprising elements of each of the parent groups is referred to as?
Hybridization.
Wonderful. Alright. Which of the following practices does not lead to deforestation?
Crop rotation.
Wonderful. Which of the following terms refers to the historical feature of the Caribbean? Enslavement, right? That would be historical. 11. Oceans and landforms are found on the subterranean feature of the Earth's crust known as?
The plate.
The plate. Alright, hold on. You see, the word subterranean makes you think about the mantle specifically, but it would be a plate. 12. One of the arguments most often used to justify insularity in the Caribbean is that? Is it C?
C.
Which of the following is not associated with Parliament in the Westminster system?
Is this B?
That's not like a question.
It's B. Judiciary.
Alright, so should not be a part of Parliament. Separation of powers. 14. Music helps Caribbean people in the diaspora to cement their identity. A part of this phenomenon is referred to as, or referred to...
Transnationalism.
Transnationalism. Alright. Everyone else agrees?
Sorry, isn't it transculturation?
Well, transculturation, alright. So you're saying that we're using Caribbean music, right, as a mean to cement identity or Caribbean identity while not being a part of the Caribbean. So you're saying that is transculturation. Firstly, what's transculturation? Like, what is it? I want to know what something is and everything just falls into place or should fall into place.
Okay, so according to Google, transculturation is basically the merging and converging of cultures.
Okay, according to the source that you found on the search engine Google, yes. Perfect, right? But does this show transculturation?
No.
So what is transnationalism? Transnationalism then?
Once again, according to Google, describes a social process whereby migrants operate in social fields that cross geographic, political, and cultural borders.
Alright. So we're saying that well, transnationalism can refer to the flow of cultural aspects across borders, right? And transculturation, right, speaks to the general mixing of the two cultures. It's a type. It can be referred to as a type of hybridization, right? But in this capacity here, we're not generally saying that there are two cultures that are being mixed, but we're saying that we take the Caribbean culture, right, which is music as a part of immaterial culture, and we're continuing it, right, or embodying it outside of the Caribbean. So that sounds more like transnationalism or transculturation. Which one? Because we're not mixing it enough. It's still Caribbean music, but we're just practicing elsewhere. And Caribbean music itself is already syncretic in nature. So, which one would we put as the answer? Let me check the chat to see if anybody's typing anything. Alright, you guys do have an answer?
I think it would be the transnationalism.
Alright. Specifically. Okay, let me see. Did somebody raise their hand? Wait, I heard. Oh, I'm seeing A. So syncretism, right? Is a type of hybridization, right? So we would have two different cultures, well, being mixed. It's usually coming out of assimilation in a sense, right? And acculturation. Those can result in syncretic aspects of culture. But what we're saying is that syncretism has already been one of the factors that formed Caribbean music. And what we're doing is just taking that aspect of culture and carrying it up across geographical borders, which is a type of transnationalism more so than transculturation or assimilation or syncretism. So I think that the answer would be D, but if you have a plausible opposition to the answer, I'll take it. Alright, 15. Which of the following Caribbean countries have a unicameral parliament?
St. Vincent and Guyana.
Alright. St. Vincent and Guyana. Which of the following indices, right? Is that indices? Is an effective measure of human development?
Life expectancy.
Life expectancy.
Alright, wonderful. Sustainable tourism mainly involves
B.
catering to the needs of tourists while ensuring future. Wonderful. Which of the following measures is used in determining economic development?
GDP.
GDP. And what is GDP?
Gross domestic product.
Okay. What is GNP?
Gross national
Gross
product.
national product.
All right. 19. To mitigate the effects of trade liberalization, countries in the Caribbean region may try to improve efficiency by 1 and 3. Agreed? All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Laying off workers wouldn't be something that they would do, but it would be an effect. Right? The more we automate, the more unskilled laborers become obsolete. Right? 20. Which of the following institutions is an extension of CARICOM?
CSME A.
Wonderful. Which of the following factors is considered the greatest challenge to development in the Caribbean?
B.
Yes,
B.
sir.
B.
Cultural imperialism. All right. Greatest challenge. Challenge to it. Cultural imperialism. Wait, did somebody raise their hand? Let me check. Oh wow. Give me a second. Okay, go ahead.
Why would the cultural?
I can't hear you that well. Like you're really faint.
Why would it be cultural imperialization and not regional integration?
That's why I really stopped for a second. I'm like, well, it's for development specifically. A challenge to development within the Caribbean per se. Of course, regionalization. Well, regionalization is a huge thing that could benefit development of Caribbean states together, but I'm not sure whether or not they're referring to that specifically. Cultural imperialism will actually hinder human development, which will hinder development overall, right? But I guess regional integration would have been the greatest challenge to regionalism, right, or to something like that per se. So I think cultural imperialism is a fine answer. But what are you suggesting for regional integration? All right, I don't hear any suggestions, so I guess I'll just move on. All right, go ahead. Oh, let me see here. I mean, sure. All right. That makes sense. Give me a second. Let me just accept Jessica into the meeting. All right. So I understand where we're coming from as it relates to that, but the Caribbean as a whole. So the factors, well, development in the Caribbean. So you're saying that regional integration is actually the safest answer, or the safer answer here? Yes.
Sir,
No. Maybe.
but
Go ahead.
question: does regional integration promote development? Isn't that the
Yes, it
purpose of
does.
it?
Exactly.
Cultural imperialism would be like some level of insularity, wouldn't it?
It could breed insularity, but I don't think it itself is a level of insularity.
Oh, alright.
It can bring forth insularity. So you're saying, okay. So regional integration itself is a challenge to development? Because if you read it like that, is regional integration a challenge to development per se? It would be a facilitator of development per se. So I would understand that. But if you're thinking of it as a hurdle, then sure. But I guess
I'm reading it in a sense of it being a limitation. If it is not there, it is going to hinder another factor, in this case, hindering development, in my opinion.
So I get it all depends on how we read it, I guess. If we read it, we can probably get two different concepts out of it. But if you just take it as a literal meaning of the words here, just taking it as a literal interpretation, then cultural imperialism probably is a safe answer, right?
Yeah, I think with selecting cultural imperialism, it is very straightforward because we're basically saying this is what poses the greatest challenge to development in the Caribbean. Otherwise, we could say it is regional integration because if we don't have that, there will be no there will be little to no development in the Caribbean.
Okay, let me just put an answer. So we'll give all the points for it, right? So it depends on how we interpret it. You can put either one. Right, but I think through the literal interpretation of the question, then B would be the safest answer. Because more times we read and interpret the question literally, and then after a while we start reading between the lines and filling in subliminal details. But if it becomes problematic, I normally just look at the literal interpretation of the question more so than anything else. A major multinational oil corporations go ahead. Somebody unmute. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Okay, a major multinational oil corporation plans to set up drilling operations in the coastal waters of a country. Which of the following issues should be the main concern of the country's government?
A.
Sir, I think it's A.
All right. You see, I think that in B they placed future generations, right? Just to catch anybody who is thinking about sustainability right off the bat. But I think A would be the safer answer, right? Because A is looking at the impact, right, on the ecosystem, which is a part of environmental development as well as sustainability for future generations, as it speaks to food security and how that will affect the natural resources, right, that will impact economic development within the country as well. So I think that would be a spin-off of multiple different facets. Therefore, it should be the main concern of the government for that country. All right, 23. The dependency ratio is determined by the
D.
D, sir.
proportion of the working population to those persons under the employment age. Let me see something as well. Number of it can't be over the employment age. Okay, under and over. All right, that's what I'm saying. So 24. Which of the following is a challenge to the full implementation of the CSME?
C.
Increased competition from extra-regional countries. Everyone agrees with that?
Yeah, I agree with C as well. Sir, somebody is asking for clarification on 23 in the chat.
23. Okay, so the dependency ratio, right, it usually speaks to some amount of economic development and the hindrances within economic development per se, right? So we're looking at the contribution, the contributions of the population per se to gross domestic product, right? And then overall GNP specifically. And that will be out of the working contribution per se. So if the overall population contributes to the GDP of the country, which is an economic indicator, right? That means that we can take into consideration how much of the population is actually contributing, because it's never 100%. There will always be persons who have been retired. Depending on the country, the age may vary, right? That's why it's vague saying over the employment age, right? And the persons who are still not at employment age, right? The persons who are under employment age. So the persons who are not able to be employed, whether or not they're over or under the employment age, will not be contributing, right, to economic development within the country. Therefore, that would be a part of the dependency ratio, because it speaks to what section of society or what section of the population is or are we dependent on, right? So I think that's what we're looking for there. Right? Somebody asked why 24 is not D. A high level of political commitment. You know that I think I put high level political commitment from member countries. Give me 1 second, let me just
Sir, that is not a challenge.
That
I
would
see.
have been a challenge. It's a high level.
High level of political commitment. All right. Okay, that makes sense. If you look at it like that. So the competition from extra-regional countries could challenge, right? The implementation of CSME per se. You see, the problem with subjects like Caribbean studies and multiple choice is that it is never one thing, and everything is always multifaceted. Therefore, the answers really and truly will only work for examination purposes, and these can't work anywhere outside of examination purposes. But C would be the best answer, I guess, because one could argue that that is a challenge to implementation of CSME, and one could argue that that is one of the reasons why we implement CSME. But okay,
What did we say 23 was again?
23, we're saying that 23 was D for the dependence ratio.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Let's look at this now. 25, the process whereby the flow of trade, finance, and information between countries are broadened to function as one market is known as.
I think it's A, sir. Globalization.
Globalization. All right. Which of the following is not an impact of trade liberalization among developing countries?
B.
B.
I think it's C.
C. Loss of manufacturing industries. All right. What is trade liberalization? I think I was speaking about this when you were into the paper too. I think we looked at that. Isn't it just the removal of tariffs and stuff like that? The reduction or removal of any type of transnational or international barriers from the movement of trade items and exchange of goods, as well as, and that would include what would it be? Subcharges, if I could remember clearly, tariffs and duties on objects, right? And most of these things would be enforced by regional governments. All right, enforced by the WTO, to be very honest. So it's not an impact here.
Sir, so what is the answer?
No, I was just asking. I wasn't asking, like I was telling what trade liberalization is, right? But for this though, you guys say C is the answer?
I said B.
Or B, reduction of government revenue. Okay. And then everyone else says C. Why is it B?
Yeah, because the whole idea of trade liberalization is to cut, as you said, the tariffs and all of those those duties that you would have paid prior to the liberalization. So I'm saying, how does it reduce government revenue? Doesn't it increase it to some degree?
Trade liberalization on a whole though, right? I understand what you're saying, right? But it can lower economic growth, to be very honest, because most of the developing countries put a lot of taxes or duties upon their goods when they're transporting it to the metropoles. Therefore, there will be some amount of a loss of revenue, right? Domestic tax revenue per se, right? When a lot of trade liberalization is created, right, or is enforced. So there would be loss of the revenue from the tariffs that you put on the goods. So I would understand that purview. If it's reducing government revenue, I think that would be a part of it. Somebody was putting up their hand saying something.
Yeah, I raised my hand, but you actually explained what I was going to say, because B is not the answer, because it would have been an impact of trade liberalization, because if you remove the tariffs, you're not going to gain enough money because even Jamaica Customs, it contributes to the revenue of the government. If they remove that barrier that we always complain about, they won't make enough money, and as I say, the economy won't grow. So B won't be the answer.
Okay. Okay, so we have that there. The thing is, no, it's only a problem though for the non-developed. Well, couldn't say non-developed, underdeveloped and or developing countries. For developed countries, it's not really a huge issue, right? But tariffs will go up in times of crisis, probably, right? As it relates to loss of manufacturing industries, I don't think that would be the answer because trade liberalization and globalization on a whole increases competitiveness from extra-regional, well, between extra-regional countries, right? So increasing competition means that I have to have a bigger GNP or GDP than you. And if I'm going to achieve that, I'm going to need to be automizing more. And if I'm going to be automizing more, I need more manufacturers. Therefore, it will increase manufacturing industries within the territories due to competition. So I think that's the best answer. As competitiveness is always something that is a part of trade liberalization and globalization as a whole. Everybody's fine with that though? Alright, just moving on. Social stratification in plantation society. As in, go ahead.
Somebody's asking in the chat, why not A?
Lack of political influence at the WTO. Lack of political. Okay, the person who says A, can you tell me what is your thought process for A? Nobody? Oh, the person who said A, no.
The person said they just eliminated everything else and was left with A.
Okay. But what is not an impact of trade liberalization? I don't think the loss of manufacturers would have been like an impact of trade liberalization. So I think that if you're eliminating, you shouldn't eliminate C. But you're saying a lack of political influence of the WTO would have not been an impact. It should have been an impact, right? Based on the WTO, it tries to be an international organization rather than taking, I guess, quote unquote political bribes, right, from different countries. So it tries to treat all countries, whether it is developed or developing, right, as equal. And that's why it tends to hurt developing countries because it takes into consideration standards, right, that are held across the world. I don't think A would be in it. But that's for me though. If you have proof that A would have been an answer, right, you could state there, you could state in the chat, right? But I think that C won't be there overall. C shouldn't be an impact. 27, social stratification. Go ahead. Did somebody raise their hand?
Sorry, you're not checking the chat. Put in the chat.
Oh, in the chat.
I was saying, right? For the loss of manufacturing industries, like, wouldn't, like, trade liberalization, it's cheaper to import. There's certain countries that can compete with, like, the rest of the countries, them that have the technology and stuff, wouldn't that cause a lot of... And most people just prefer to import the stuff.
Prefer to import. Okay, so you're saying that because of trade liberalization, it would be easier to just, you know, passively import, right, than completely, you know, challenge large manufacturing powers. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Well, like some Caribbean countries, they don't really have manufacturing industry. They just rely on tourism, I guess. Because it's easier to just import stuff.
Okay. Okay, the general understanding that I have of this, right, is that, well, when you do, well, trade liberalization will increase export profits. It should increase export profits as well as the ease of importation for some countries, right? So I think it would actually increase export profits, and if you're increasing export profits, you'd like to increase your manufacturing industries. Even though within the Caribbean has a historical, world
Like,
record for failing industries, right?
don't,
But go ahead.
but like, don't the Caribbean just send most of their natural resources to other countries to do manufacturing instead of us?
It can, right? Or it used to throughout history, right? But now within contemporary Caribbean society, we're seeing the growth of industries, right? That would manufacture our own products here, and that is because of the rising competition due to trade liberalization, right? Because around 100 years ago there was banana, well, you have, for example, the banana industry, right, or the sugarcane industry and stuff like that, right? Most of those things were just sent as raw materials, as you are correct in stating so, right? But nowadays we're seeing the growth of different industries that manufacture Caribbean made products in order for the Caribbean countries to compete on a global market. I understand that trade liberalization on a wide scale, right, could impact the countries negatively due to the failure of new industries, but I'm not sure whether or not it will contribute to loss of existing industries. Because there is a high rate of failure of new industries when they're outcompeted, right? That's due to being outcompeted, but the competition will actually increase our affinity for creating new industries. And I don't think that, because even if you eliminate C, right, per se, right, A would probably be the best next answer, right, or the next, is it best next or next best, whatever, it would be an answer, right? But the lack of political influence would have been an impact of trade liberalization.
How is it an impact? When you have like more political influence, the WTO, because you've removed most of your tariffs and what
If
they
you
want to
remove
do.
all the tariffs, right, so every country on a whole would that subscribes to the WTO, because it's not everybody, right? But all the countries that subscribe to the WTO, if they all act under one standard, right, how would politics influence that? Because the one standard is reduction of all these tariffs and taxes per se. So if every country has to subscribe to that per se, right, under the WTO and its treaties, because it doesn't really work overall through you know heads of government speaking and them changing stuff. It's written treaties that are put in place that everybody is guided under, no matter who is leading the country at the time. So I don't think that there would be a lot of political influence, right? Political influence would have been a negative impact on the WTO specifically. So the WTO works towards decreasing political influence. And that's why I would think that that would be a reason why they inputted, or, well, started trade liberalization, right, as a standard across all countries that sign under the WTO. But I get what you're saying, right? That that countries with more political influence would be able to create new policies under the WTO that would benefit them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sort of, because they're asking specifically for like the developing countries,
Mm-hmm.
like the smaller, like if they're aligned with what the WTO want, what they like cater for them to.
Okay.
Other than
So which of the following is not an impact of trade liberalization among developing countries? So you're saying not an impact of the WTO. Developing countries won't have a lot of political influence. It would lack political influence at the WTO. So A would still not be an answer. It would be not an impact. Wouldn't it? Okay.
At this point, not sure. Okay.
All right. So let's continue this. Right, the
Yeah.
paper, and we'll see what we can discuss and furthermore eliminate. Social stratification in plantation society has influenced what specifically? So we know that that is an answer.
B.
So B would be the
Connect,
best answer.
believe.
All right. Which of the following outcomes results from globalization?
D.
All right. Commercialization of culture
Right.
specifically.
Right.
Go ahead.
27. How was it like influenced gender equality in the plantation society? But in the
Social
plantation,
stratification in the plantation society has influenced. Right.
yeah.
So we're looking. Hold on. Let me see. All right. So let me just ask before I continue. Right. The persons, when you read this question, right, are you looking at the social stratification for the plantation society at the time when the plantation society was a thing, or looking at the impact now from the social stratification in the plantation society? What is the context of this question? We're looking at it while plantation society was a thing, while the plantocracy was a thing, or we're looking at it as the contemporary Caribbean? Which one?
I kind of read it in the case of at the time the plantation society, which one it would have an influence on.
Okay, at the time, then 3 would have been an answer, right? And gender equality specifically would have been more so than the use of technology.
To me, right, I just thought that the plantation society wasn't really a gender thing. It's mainly between the races.
Yeah, it's
So,
not a
like,
gender thing for real.
how would I think and how would gender equality kind of get in there? Through like plantation society kind of caused that. Sure about that one.
Right. So, let me see. I'll place
The
an
white
explanation here. Go ahead.
whites would have more technology than the blacks. So
The use of technology. My issue with the use of technology here is that if it is in a socially stratified society specifically, right, technology generally would have been afforded to the persons on top and would not have been available to the persons on bottom. So I think it's more of an issue of the availability of technology per se, because the use of technology implies that both would have the technology, right? That everyone in the society would have a specific technology, and technology in what regard we're talking about here.
wouldn't it just be mainly the people of the highest social class
Mhm.
have technology in a sense?
Yeah, and everybody beneath no, right?
Don't.
Yeah, they would not. Wait, hold on, let me see something.
I'm not.
All right. So your argument here is the use of technology and distribution of wealth.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking.
All right. For the persons who say 1 and 3, what do you say and why? Well, I mean, why do you say that?
Sir, why I chose 1 and 3 is, well, why I justify gender equality is because even within the whole stratification model on the plantation, they were also stratified based on gender, even within their classes, where women were at the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Caribbean society, right? In Caribbean society, that it has a similar model where men are placed above women. So we still see that being reflected in our society today. So that's why I chose that. So
All right. So we're saying that when we're looking at the plantation society, we divide by race, right? And then after race, per se, the upper classes, which were generally of a different race than colored persons, right, would have been divided on basis of economic standpoints, right, or socioeconomic classes, those divisions, right? and the blacks per se, or the enslaved persons, and or in, well, this is plantation society, so the enslaved persons were divided based on working output, right, on what they did, whether or not they're artisan enslaved, field enslaved, or house enslaved, right? And within those different categories, men had more value than women within most of these categories. Within field enslaved, which were at the bottom of the social ladder, right? Men and women both had equal standing there, right? But men could cut more sugarcane, therefore men had more value, right? For artisan enslaved, men were deemed as more intelligent than women, no matter the race, right? Therefore, they were generally seen as more skilled artisan enslaved than women, so they were placed above women in that category as well. House enslaved, now women were put over men because women were seen as more submissive and less likely to, you know, less likely to harm, right, anybody within the house as a house enslaved. Therefore, women would usually, right, get a higher standing within the house than men, or they would be found in the house more so than men. And the same thing within the plantocracy specifically, even though there were female plantation owners, most of them were men. And this was carried on through different practices, such as, you know, some marital laws, some European marital laws that stated that the land and everything, right, and everything would be put in the name of the male per se, and the male should inherit everything, while the female was basically just a tack on to it, right? So I think that social stratification, even though plantocracy, plantation society, is based on wealth, right, well, race then wealth, right, there is subtle differences within gender equality within the plantation society, because it was a tool for implanting sexism, right, as a part of, well, Caribbean society or greater Caribbean society, right? So even though it's not as present, I would say that, and I understand where anybody's coming from if they put to the use of technology, right, but I would believe that the persons higher up will have the technology and the persons below won't have the technology per se, right? And technology to do what? I think it's a bit vague. And even if it was supposed to be used as a perfect answer, I believe that use of technology should be changed to availability of technology, because the upper class will have it and the lower class won't, right? And you can't use technology if you don't have technology. And as I said, technology for what, right? Even if you want to justify it, right, technology within this time would have been out of the agrarian revolution, and these are used on sugar plantations owned by, right, probably the slave masters, right, or the backer masters, I guess. But I think that it would be gender equality and distribution of wealth that would have still influenced the Caribbean then and now. Right, so I think that B would have been the better answer. But there's still an argument we can clear it up. 29. Which of the following economic factors affects a country's development? Were you guys able to find this? What was the answer here?
I'm sticking with C, but some people say D.
Factors that affect a country's development. What are the indicators of economic development? The indicators are what? GNP, GDP, FDI. Well, Human Development Index is not per se for economic, but that's a factor, that's an indicator, right? The factors that hinder development or economic development or facilitate economic development, right, would be employment, and in case here, competitiveness, right, and the dependency ratio, etc., etc., etc. So, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were saying something. Let me just. Right. So my argument here is that GDP is a indicator of economic development and not a factor. GDP is the result of, economic, factors per se. So GDP is what we use to measure whether or not, the country's economic development. We use it to measure that, or use it to indicate how developed a country is economically, rather than it being a contributor or a factor of the country's development per se, if you get what I'm saying. So competitiveness and employment rates will increase GDP, which is an indicator and not a factor of economic development. So that's my understanding there. The persons who put D, could I hear your side of the story? Yes, no, maybe. So all I have there is that this is an indicator more so than a factor. You know what? It's because go ahead.
Kind of thinking like, I was kind of thinking that like, if a country has a high gross domestic product, they're more likely to develop compared to one that don't have a high domestic product, less likely to develop.
That's
like,
true.
I was thinking gross domestic product entails productivity and everything in the so
That is true. That's absolutely
I'm
true.
not sure.
No, you can't not be sure because you're absolutely right. But I understand that, right? But I'm not sure if it would be a factor that affects the country's development, but it would be a result, right, of the economic factors. That's what I'm saying. Because you're not wrong, You said everything completely fine about the GDP, but I don't think it is a factor that affects the country's development because it is a result of the country's development, if you get what I'm saying.
I mean,
and then you get GNP from GDP.
Yeah. And I just looked, to be honest, I just looked at which two were like economic based, because 1 and 3, and that's why I just had those two. I guess competitiveness. Yeah.
Oh, competitiveness is the shaky one?
To me, because like when I just looked for which two were economic,
Okay, competitiveness, right? Competitiveness in terms of economic factors, right? Competitiveness within an economy, right? Different businesses will compete to dominate markets per se, right? And if they're competing, they have to increase their output, which would assist in. Go ahead.
I get that, like competitiveness, but I know just based off of like whatever were in the text, I've never seen competitiveness. That's why I never.
I get that.
Because like none of the books really have competitiveness.
Jennifer, do have competitiveness in her book?
I never read a Jennifer one. I read
what do you mean? That is the Caribbean Says Bible. Jennifer Mohammed.
I'm gonna check it out.
Alright, have a look at it, and if it don't have it, we can revisit it. Alright. Individuals who are refused employment because they live in a low income community or live in low income communities are discriminated against based on
B.
Class. Alright. Participant observe that don't even make any sense though. The question, never mind. 31. Participant observation is viewed as a subjective method of data collection because
C for this one.
D.
Alright, so why C and why D?
The reason I kind of said C, because based on observation, however you perceive it, you could like draw a conclusion, and that conclusion could definitely be wrong.
So you're saying that that's subjective?
Yeah, but like D, like participant observation, not all the time you have a close association with the people you're observing. Makes sense. So sometimes you might just tell the people that maybe you're doing an investigation to see how they react or something like that. Like you don't know those people or anything. Just select ones and observe them over time.
Alright. The person who said D, why?
Because once a researcher is going to be in close association with any respondents, they're bound to be influenced by what is going on around them, regardless. So I think it's D because of that.
Okay. So we're saying that in order for observation to take place, the participants must be cognizant of this observation. That's what you're saying. And because they need to be cognizant of the observation, the researcher and the participants would have crossed paths, right? Whether it be through consent forms or whatever. And we're saying that could influence the respondents, or that could influence the data collected. I think. Question: Is
Like,
that it?
primary like subjective though, like how that relate to subjective in a sense.
Subjectivity speaks to what?
Subjectivity don't speaks to like based on what you interpret it in a sense.
You, right? And objectivity is overall through empirical evidence or whatever it wants to be, right?
Yeah.
So I think the issue is that the researchers' association with the respondents could be an issue, right? But not. I think it's not in every case there's a close association per se with the respondents. Because I understand that subjective issues can arise when the researcher, right, has some amount of relationship with the participant. Therefore, the participants shall behave differently. For example, right, if you're within a classroom and your principal is going to be doing observation, right? You know who the principal is, right? You have dealt with the principal before, and due to the relationship between the participants, which are the students, and the principal, there would be issues with the data observed because they know the researcher, right? They have a relationship with the researcher, therefore the data would be askew. But as was stated before, it's not every single time, or it's not in every instance which a researcher would have a close association with the respondents, right? For example, if you're observing children, right, on a playground per se, you're going to get the content from the parents of the children, right? You don't necessarily know the children, but you're observing, right? And based on what you understand about children or your prior experiences may affect the data or may affect what you perceive. So I would believe that C would be the closer answer. But I'm not sure if anybody else has D and what you guys can use to defend D as an answer. My answer is C, alright? Not sure about anybody else. But if it is proven to be problematic, we can look at further evidence, right? Which of the following methods of sampling does purposive sampling belong?
Probability.
Alright, I don't think we have an issue with that. 33, which of the following activities illustrates the term triangulation?
C, sir.
Okay. Combination of research methods, everybody agrees? Alright. Do we agree? Hello?
Can you explain why it's C?
No, I hear C, so I put C and I'm asking why is it C?
Sir, because I read on Google
Mm-hmm.
that it uses a combination, so I pick C.
Alright. So triangulation does speak to that, right? It speaks to using a variety of sources, right? A variety of research methodologies and theories and stuff like that in order to address a research question. And addressing a research question is generally just researching, right? So it would be a combination of research methods per se. Triangulation generally exists there. So I would think that. Some persons may choose B using 3 methods of presenting data. Right, triangulation can be present within data, but if you're going to be using 3 different, or well, not really 3 different, but if you're going to be using a combination of research methods, therefore your data have to be presented in different ways, shouldn't it? Because if we're going to be using, let's say, interviews, a survey, and probably a documentary, right? You can't use the same data presenting data, right? Are they presenting What is that called? The data presentation. You can't use the same method of data presentation for all data collected within a triangulated research. So B would be a result of C. Therefore, I believe that C would be the best answer. Right? It's not necessarily investigating three variables, and it's not necessarily employing different methods of sampling. It's just using different research methods per se. Right? You're gonna still have the same sample, you just carry out different methods. Alright, so I think that C would be the best answer here. 34, which of the following is not a characteristic of the research process?
Conformability.
Conformability. Sure. Anybody else have a different answer here?
No, sir.
Alright.
Also,
Also
because all the rest of them I recognize except that.
Alright. A researcher uses similar methods to those used in a previous experiment and compares the results. What aspect of research does the approach best illustrate?
Replication.
Alright, similar methods to those. Replication, alright. Everyone agrees replication?
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
go
but
with that.
Alright. Websites which are most likely to be unbiased are particularly useful to researchers are powered by
Government agencies and universities.
Alright, so we have that. Even though university is kind of iffy, but it's the best answer there. It's most likely they'll ask for. So 37, which of the following is an advantage of using open-ended questions in a research questionnaire?
I'm D for this.
Sir D.
D. Alright, so we're saying that new ideas were not previously considered. Or that were not previously considered. That's not true.
Sir, what about A?
Greater clarity of information. Well, greater clarity. So open-ended question allows for the person or the respondent to divulge, right? For them to not only click a yes or a no, but give a why, right? So yeah, I think this is between A or D. It can do both, but what do you think is the best answer? Because it can participants can bring forth new ideas that weren't previously considered. That's true. They can, right? And they can also clarify the information. Go ahead.
I'm thinking that A is out because despite having like open-ended questions, some participants may not even like clarify it. It's still just like a sentence alone or just that.
So
or they
based on
might
your
write something
experience.
in a way. They could write information in a way that they understand, but you don't really understand it. So
All right.
I
What is?
agree.
Go ahead. All right. So what are the disadvantages of qualitative research or qualitative data? Sorry. As it relates to data analysis, what is the disadvantage? Go ahead.
Qualitative research?
Yeah, qualitative data.
Sir, it's not objective in nature.
It's not objective. Alright. Anything else? When we have qualitative data, isn't it harder to clarify and to quantify and probably analyze and then put into different margins? It's gonna be harder. So I think that based on the fact that you have more open-ended questions, right? The information would have to be clarified by the person doing the entire questionnaire. I know that it would give I don't think itself would give a greater clarity to the information collected, because when the open-ended questions collect the information, how would the questions themselves give greater clarity to the information collected? If you look at the question like that, we're saying that the advantage of using open-ended questions in a research questionnaire is giving greater clarity to the information collected. Give me an example of an open-ended question. If we have an example of an open-ended question, we should be able to understand this. You guys can come up with any examples?
Generally, any question you could just ask it open-endedly.
Anything that is not a yes or a no, or doesn't ask you to place yourself into a category, right?
Yeah.
So that allows you to collect more qualitative information. I don't think generally the question itself will give greater clarity to the information collected. So I think that would be a better answer, to be very honest. I think they would be a better answer, to be very honest.
Sir, and I am saying too, for the options that you give, like in a previous question, may not necessarily reflect the person's opinions. So with them having that open-ending questions, they can give you an idea. For example, why is the sky blue? You might think it's blue because it reflects the ocean, right, sir? But they might not believe in that ideology. So it opens up new thought processes as well. So that's why I picked D.
All right.
Personally.
It's true. I think A, right? A has some clarity to it, you know, right? But in multiple choices, right, we generally look for the answer that satisfies it a little bit better than the others, right? Therefore, I think D would be able to satisfy this question more than the others, right? Because most times in multiple choice, it's not that all of them just outright wrong, you know. It's just that one is a bit better than the other. Alright, so we'll go with that. 38. In which section of the research are the participants described in detail?
So the introduction? Well, I'm not sure.
Okay. What do you do for your IA? Where do you describe the participants? Sorry, if you did your IA, just saying. If you did your IA, and I know why I said that.
Wait, what? What's the question?
Sir, they specifically said.
I'm asking where do you put it? Go ahead.
I was saying they specifically said in detail, so I'm not thinking that the introduction would give a detail.
Alright. So where did you do your analysis of the participants or of the sample within your IA?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Methodology, you would talk about the sample.
In the methodology, you'll speak about the sample population that you used. Alright, so I would believe that methodology would be the best place. Because within the methodology, of course, you give an account of your method, right? And then the method specifically applied to a specific population. So I think it would be there. The data analysis now speaks more so to the data than the participants, right? Because in the methodology, you'd have already previously outlined who you're talking to and what you're going to do with the people. In the data analysis now, you know, all we care about is the data. Right? So I think that would be the best answer. 39. Why is it important to clarify a research problem in the initial stage of the process?
Sure, this one.
C.
Alright, so we're saying C. Anybody else have a different answer?
I was saying I'm not sure in this one, but I'm saying
But what do you have, even though you're not sure? Are you saying that you have nothing?
I initially had D. Alright.
That's not a problem.
I initially had
D. So you initially had D, alright. Okay. So we clarify a research problem in initial stage. Let me see. To give insight to the investigative process. Would that be an answer?
No,
to provide a solution to the problem being what? B can't be an answer. I don't think it can be. Right. To provide insight and inspiration, right? Those type of things usually speak to the context, and context is usually built through reviewing literature per se, right? Or doing prior reading before you establish a proper question. So I think that I think that would be before. So it's either C or D, to prohibit the formation of multiple research. But I think that D is the most straightforward answer here, because if you already clarify one, it would prohibit the formation of others, right? But C here, to provide the basis for conducting an empirical investigation. That's true as well. So do you guys lean more to C or to D? Let me check the chat real quick to see if anybody has been typing. So Trish says C. Alright. Cleon says D. Alright, no problem. Say guys, more to C than D. I understand the concept of prohibiting the formation of multiple problem statements though. Okay, so for the persons who pick C, what's your explanation? What's the explanation for that? Why C? Why C over D specifically? If you choose the answer, you must be able to tell us why. Nobody? Nobody's able to tell us why C is the better answer here, or why you guys choose C? Go ahead. So.
Okay, so I chose C because I think it's the more, as you said, the most straightforward answer, because when you're doing an investigation, you need a guideline to go by instead of just, going off nothing. You need something to act as your marker to guide you. That's basically what a problem statement is for.
Okay. So clarify the research problem, and we're saying that this is the problem that we're trying to answer to, or to rectify in some way. This is what our research, right, is going to be guided by. That's what you're saying, right? That this is the problem that we're seeking to alleviate. Therefore, that's your explanation for why it's the basis for conducting the empirical investigation. All right. All right, so we'll stay with C for now. If there's an issue, then we'll bring it up again. For this now, number 40, which of the following groupings does the circle Y represent?
So accessible population.
All right. 41, which of the following resources is likely to provide primary data for the research project?
A book.
A book would be primary data. Sure. What would be primary data?
C.
C, a report. Interesting. What's primary data versus secondary data? Somebody tell me that.
Well, primary data would be data that is collected at the time of the event, in a sense.
So it's
About
usually...
secondary is...
Alright.
Yeah,
so...
as you were saying.
Uh-huh. Exactly, right? So primary data is usually straight from the source, and if it's straight from the source, it's usually done at the time of the event, right? So that makes sense. So if, let's say that we're talking about indentureship, when I was doing indentureship for paper 2, I showed a video, right, right, of a Guyanese woman who has lived through some amount of indentureship, right? So that information coming from that woman would be directly from the source specifically, right? Yeah, that interview, or that, yeah, would be directly from that time, right? So it's not that it's in the time, it can be outside the time, but it's coming from a survivor, it's coming from the source specifically. But secondary data is usually collected from secondary sources, right? So what we'll do now, right, is take that primary information and interpret it, right? We could use it to analyze it. Once you analyze something, right? Once you've already mined the data and go through data analysis, therefore it will not be primary data anymore. It will have to be some amount of secondary data. So it's, for example, when you are doing your research for your IAs, you'll collect it by any means, well, by whatever means you use, the methodology. That raw information is the primary data. When you took it upon to yourself, right, to analyze that data and draw conclusions from that data is no longer primary, or should no longer be considered primary. You guys get what I'm saying? Do you guys agree or disagree?
Well, I agree.
Yeah, sure.
Doesn't have word like consistently being updated all the time after every single event to get updated.
Alright. So it would have to be consistently updated over time right there. Then it will lose its primary status. Alright. Did Trish raise her? Okay, go ahead, Matthew.
I would say C because they say answer report is a recording of speech.
Okay, it's a recording.
It is questions and answers.
Okay, no problem. Trish, what were you saying?
I was going to say the exact same thing because upon my research, it said it's a primary source because it's basically just a recording of things that actually happened or something written down of things that was like first-hand experience, according to my research. Yeah.
All right. So we're going with C as the best answer?
Yeah.
Alright.
Yes, yeah.
So, alright. Thanks for that. Which of the following are measures of central tendency?
A.
A, sir.
Alright. So because this traumatized me last week in a small so-called pop quiz. 43. Which of the following forms of data presentation is most suitable for continuous data?
Line graph.
So we're saying line here. Just to be sure, what I was saying before is that histogram generally, right? Coming from a scientific point of view, histograms are top tier at doing this, right? And they are types of bar charts, right? But not every bar chart is a histogram. Therefore, I think it was Amanda who was stating that it is a little bit vague to just say bar chart because not all bar charts are histograms, but line graphs are also great at showing continuous data. So if it said histogram, therefore histogram could probably be a contender for the answer, but in this place, line graph would be the safest. Right? That's what you guys were saying. Go ahead. Somebody raise your hand.
I was asking, can you explain number 40? Last time you had C.
Wait, who? C? C? Hold on.
Number 40.
It was a fever dream. Alright. So, okay. For C, right? The target population, right? We have this subject here, right? Yeah, last time I probably put C, right? Okay, so we have the subject here, right? So we're looking for a population that is closest in relation to the subject per se, right? And I would say that that would have been probably the sample, right? Or the target population, because the sample would have been from the target population, right? So we're looking at that specifically. Following? Let me see if I can shade it. Right? What does the subject speak to? The subject is the research subject, right? So everything outside is the general population, and that is the research subject, right? So if we're looking at this area here, this would usually speak to sample that you collected, right? Most of it is let me just let in that person per se, right? Okay, so this would probably be the sample that you have, right? Why I would say that Y would be an accessible population per se, right, is that Y generally would be close enough to the subject but not far, not farther than necessary, right? So we're saying that the accessible population with the persons closer to the subject area or closer to the subject of the research, right, that have the most impact on the research, or that what you're researching, right, has the most impact on. Because if you're, let's say, researching the incidence rates of period poverty within high schools across a Caribbean country, right, you wouldn't generally have males as a part of as a part of the accessible population. Males would probably be a part of the general population that we see here, but the accessible population would be persons who are directly influenced or would have been influenced by a factor, right, of the research subject. So that's why I put an accessible population more so than the entire general population, because the entire general population wouldn't generally be accessible. So I would put the shaded region that I put right there as a sample population, or our target population, right, which we would take the sample from, and then probably have Y as the accessible population, then everything outside just being a part of the general population. That was my understanding initially for this. But I take it that some persons say that everybody in the general population is accessible. Alright, somebody did say that. So do you guys agree with that narrative?
No.
Sir,
Go ahead.
I agree that the answer is D, because when I went on Google after the whole debate over the question, I read that the accessible population does form a part of the target population. However, those individuals are the ones who are more willing to answer the questions, so they would be closer to the sample unit, as they are more willing and open to answer the questions.
Okay, so if you're speaking about participant participation, that sounds so weird. Respondent participate, no, that doesn't make any sense either. Sample participation, right, or the population's participation with the research per se. So you're saying that everybody won't be open, and the persons who are able, right, or consent technically, right, to the research would have been closer to the subject than further out. So you're saying that you agree with D. All right. Any other issues with the question? Okay, moving forward. Prakash is researching the effects of physical activity on academic achievement. In this research, physical activity would be considered an aggregate, an attribute, a dependent variable, or an independent variable.
They're independent variable.
Why? I like that. Go ahead.
There, because I read that the independent rare variable depends on nothing. So, well, it is in its name, right? So the academic achievement is a result of the effects of physical activity, right, sir? So that's why I said that the physical activity would be the independent variable, because something results as a result of this in the question, not necessarily it as a result.
So what would the academic achievement be?
The dependent variable.
Okay.
Well,
so if those are two variables, and academic achievement is dependent on physical activity, therefore physical activity is the independent variable. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody have a different answer for this?
Yeah, similar just to that. It's just like when you're doing a normal everyone that you have the sort of not being changed due to another factor or variable. So the physical activity what causes like different academic, so it should be independent, it should be affected by anything.
All right. So here we have Roger selects a group of first form students to do a sample test for his research. He promises students that he would not release their personal data nor their scores. During the test, he draws up a seating plan of the participants, which ethical research principle did Roger violate?
Sir B.
B.
Jim B.
Conformability. Confidentiality. Okay. All right. Everybody agrees with B? Any other answer?
I would say A.
Okay. I think I put A as well, right? I put as in past tense of put, right? Put and put are past or whatever. So I put A before. Confidentiality. So what we're saying is that he says that he won't release the personal data nor the scores that would keep confidentiality there, but he draws up a seating plan of the participants. So I would believe that the seating plan of the participants wouldn't necessarily break confidentiality, but it will break anonymity, as everyone would know where the students would be sitting within this general research sample. So I would think that it breaks anonymity, but I don't think the seating plan itself would break breach any confidentiality agreements. Because why would the seating of the students breach, their personal data or their scores? I'm not sure why B, but I'm gonna give the persons who said B a chance to tell me why B.
Oh wait, like anonymous, right? Doesn't that mean like completely unknown?
Yeah.
Don't you have to be in to carry out the test? So are you actually anonymous?
Okay, I get what you're
I
saying.
mean, I'm not sure how anonymous.
So you're saying that overall you're gonna have to be in the test anyways, therefore anonymity is broken.
Yeah.
Alright.
Anonymity allow people to just use your
Okay.
data, just that you have to be completely unknown. So,
Okay. Alright. So if you're looking at that, then he's violating anonymity or violating Okay, where's the breach of confidentiality? I want to ask that.
first up, what is the seating plan?
The seating plan in exams, for example, when CXC is taking your stuff, right? Well, not taking your stuff, right? When they're taking your seating, the register is how you're sat in the room. Your registration number does that, so that's a seating plan. They know who was where, therefore cheating is easier to discern. That's for CXC specifically, right? But that's a seating plan. So I want to ask, like,
Wait, excuse me, sir. Could you please repeat?
the registration numbers aren't lined up in a way in which they know exactly where you were in the exam room. Isn't that the seating plan? Don't they know exactly where you were? So you know that who was beside who and whatever, who was behind, who was in front of, and that's why the register is taken in a specific way as well. It's not just taking any willy-nilly. These people know what they're doing. So you know that if your answers look kinda too, similar to somebody else's, or the invigilator notes down something about you, everybody around you should be brought into speculation as well because of the seating plan. But it's something like that. Alright, that is what I propose to be. It makes sense. But that's a seating plan per se. But back to this question, I want to know, where's confidentiality broken? Because we're looking at the question, we're not assuming anything outside of what is written on the paper before us. So where's confidentiality broken? We do have other papers to go through, by the way. And I do have an organic chemistry test tomorrow, so
More about it. But I guess it could be A and B. 'Cause,
Okay,
like,
I'm
the
okay.
part where
I know what
Alright,
you're
sure.
Hold on, and let me just say this before you guys continue, right? I'm sorry for cutting it, Cleon. I'm gonna allow you to continue and then Miss Harrison, right? But I'm not saying where's confidentiality broken, like as a rhetorical question. I'm literally asking. So what were you saying, Mr. Jardine, and then Miss Harrison wanted to say something? Go ahead.
I was saying, I guess it could actually be A, like anonymity. Because confidentiality is just like your personal information, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really see him kind of giving out your personal information, just like a seating plan. So,
Alright.
yeah, I don't really think afterwards.
Okay. Tony? What were you saying? Sarson?
Me, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, I still don't understand because I'm looking at it. Well, confidentiality, right, defines it as it being kept a secret, right, sir?
Yeah.
So what and he promised them that he would not release their scores, well, their personal data, right? Sir, but with him drawing up this seating plan, sir, wouldn't it to some extent reveal like for example, how much they would have gotten?
Per se, how? I mean,
Sir,
we're looking. I get what you continue. I don't want to block you. Go ahead.
sir, you can continue.
No, I was asking how I know. Because based on the question, we're not looking at anything, so we don't know whether or not they were assigned numbers by seating, right? Or anything like that. So we don't know per se what their scores were based on the seating plan. You get what I'm saying? So, and the scores could have been just used for the research and not released. Or the scores could have been given back to the specific persons. I'm not sure. Because he said that he won't release the scores. So we don't know who the scores would go to because scores aren't released in the first place. What I'm saying here is that anonymity could be a part of confidentiality, right? And that means that anonymity was broken, which means that confidentiality was broken, but anonymity specifically was broken and no other section under confidentiality was broken. That's what my understanding is, right? Because confidentiality can be brought under anonymity, right? And well, anonymity can be under it, personal data can be under it and stuff like that, right? But he didn't breach it to an extent in which personal data or the scores were released. It's just that he knew exactly where they were sitting. Right? So I would think that anonymity is there. And as Cleon said before, right, you have to be in the room. Therefore, you can't be an anonymous respondent because you have to be in the room to take the research. Well, to take the test per se. Right? And you can't argue whether or not it's digital because you took a seating plan. Therefore, you're in a room. So I would believe that A would be the best answer. Anybody else has anything else to say about this one? So I would say A, but some persons are saying confidentiality. So let me just put an asterisk here just to make sure that persons knew that there's a little bit of contention with this question. Right? So I would say that would be that paper.